After more than 2 years of escalating threats, tariffs, and trade wars, the U.S. and China signed a new trade deal today. As Nick Schifrin tells us, it is known as Phase 1 of a potentially larger deal. But the administration, critics, and businesses all say it is crucial to make sure that it's enforced and that the reality matches the rhetoric.
Today, the world's two largest economies declared a partial truce.
Our efforts have yielded a transformative deal that will bring tremendous benefits to both countries. We have a great relationship with China.
Standing next to China's top negotiator, President Trump predicted the deal would begin fundamental reforms to China's economy.
This is the biggest deal anybody's ever seen, and it can lead to being a deal that's unprecedented because China has 1.5 billion people, and ultimately in Phase 2, we're going to be opening up China to all of your companies.
Under the deal, China agrees to purchase $200 billion over the next 2 years of U.S. agriculture, energy, manufacturing, and financial services. And the administration says China promised to protect U.S. companies' intellectual property, stop forcing American companies to transfer technology to access Chinese markets, and lift financial service barriers. But China has pledged many of those reforms before and has a history of failing to buy as much as it promises. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has supported the administration's China policy goals, but says this agreement failed to go far enough.
The agreement does not address the Chinese government's massive subsidies to support domestic industries, devastating global markets, and eroding American competitiveness.
For months, the Trump administration and China have targeted each other with tariffs that hurt the Chinese economy and U.S. farmers and raised some consumer prices. As part of the deal, the U.S. reduced some tariffs, but maintained most of the tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of goods already imposed. President Trump said those tariffs and new enforcement language would guarantee that China won't break its promises.
We have full, again, the word, one of the strongest things we have, total and full enforceability. And you know what that means. Total, full enforceability.
Reaching a bigger agreement depends on how both countries follow through. President Trump said today he expects further negotiations to begin next month. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
Let's take a closer look now at some of what has been agreed to in this deal and the caveats and the criticisms around it. Peter Navarro is one of the president's top advisors on all things trade. He is the director of the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. Peter Navarro, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for being here. So let me first ask you about what we just heard Nick Schifrin report, and that is if most of the tariffs that the Trump administration has already imposed, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese...
$370 billion.
370 billion.
Primarily, and this is important, $250 billion is the high technology products that China has specifically targeted to dominate the economy in the future. And those are our technological crown jewels. Those tariffs are really essential to defending our entrepreneurs, our workers, and our manufacturers and this country.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about. If those tariffs are staying in place, how does this deal help American businesses that depend on Chinese imports and the consumers who purchase those?
Well, the implicit assumption under your question is somehow tariffs are bad. In this administration, I think what we've proven is that tariffs are really a good tool to defend our workers, our manufacturers, our innovators. They're a tool that the president has used in this case, for example, to bring China to the bargaining table to complete what is an absolutely historic deal. And by the way, the tariffs have had the effect, the beneficial effect, of reducing our trade deficit now with China for the last 4 months. That's a good thing because what it means is we're producing more here rather than there. That's more jobs. That's higher wages, and that's good reason underlying why we have the best economy and labor market in the last 5 decades.
So I hear this argument, and this is a deal that does require China to buy, as we just heard, $200 billion in specific products over
and above the
next 2 years.
2017 benchmark.
But China, as we know, has made these promises before.
Yes,
they haven't lived up to it. How do you know that this time is going to be any different?
As President Donald J. Trump said in that package, a full and enforceable deal, full and enforceable deal. Let's contrast this with the WTO, the World Trade Organization. When China joined the WTO, they broke every rule in the book. We complained. It would take 3 years or more to get satisfaction. Often a company would be out of business. This, 90 days. And complaint comes
90 days to
90
what?
days from the point of where we complain or a company complains to the point of resolution. And here's the most important thing. This is why it's fully enforceable. We have the unilateral authority to judge whether the grievance has been settled. And if Ambassador Robert E. Lighthizer, the greatest USTR in history, decides that they didn't address that, then he has the ability to put in proportion measures immediately. So this is, we can't lose here because they either abide by the deal like reformers like Leo He wants to do in China, or the other wing, the so-called mercantilist hawkish
These are
wing of
Chinese
China,
leaders you're speaking about.
they don't abide by the agreement. But in this case, unlike with the World Trade Organization, we have fully enforceable measures to take in defense of American workers.
You're saying there's new teeth here. So but let me bring up...
There's big teeth here.
All right,
there's jaws here to go with them.
Let me bring up another criticism, and again, we heard some of this. A number of economists and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and we heard some of this from him a moment ago, say there's nothing in this deal that addresses China's habit policy of subsidizing their critical industries that compete with American firms. In fact, we heard Minority Leader Schumer say today he thinks China's President Xi is privately laughing at President Trump. He said, quote, they've taken the president to the cleaners.
So here's what's interesting. Two things. One is, first of all, Chuck Schumer, when he started criticizing this deal, hadn't read it. And it wasn't released today till after the press conference. It's 86 pages, and I'll bet you a lot of money he didn't read that deal before. So that was pure politics. Let me explain what this does. I've referred to China's 7 deadly structural sins. So what we get in the first phase is we get intellectual property theft addressed, we get forced technology transfer addressed, and we get currency manipulation addressed. And over above that, we've got the purchases and financial market access. That's a big deal. That's a good deal for America. You're absolutely right, Judy. We do not get in this part of the deal the unfair subsidies. We don't get the state-owned enterprises that we have to deal with. We don't get, very important to me, is the hacking of our computers by the Chinese government to steal our business trade secrets. And the worst thing is they're killing Americans with fentanyl, okay? But we do have those tariffs in place. Those tariffs serve 2 things. They're the best defense against the Chinese in terms of this dumping.
Tariffs that are still in place.
Tariffs are still in place. They're an insurance policy that the Chinese will continue to bargain in good faith. So we think that the president's done a beautiful job on this. And by the way, you've seen this for 15 years, how we lost all these jobs because President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, they all laid down for the Chinese. President Trump standing up.
Well, we're watching, and we'll see how this turns out. But you just mentioned technology, intellectual property theft. There are lawyers who've been out there looking at this. They've been looking at the agreement. They say there are loopholes, there are exceptions. How do you know China is going to abide?
Let me just give you an example of how this is going to work. Let's take intellectual property theft, because this is something I've been working on leading into this agreement for a year now. What we're doing, counterfeits is a form of intellectual property theft. So you go online on Amazon or Alibaba or something, you buy these fake goods that come in from China. What we are doing with Customs and Border Protection every month is we're opening thousands and thousands of packages, benchmarking, and what we're finding is a counterfeit and contraband rate of 15%. It's extraordinarily high. So people are getting ripped off right and left. A lot of those products can harm you. So in this case, we're going to know over the coming months that rate's got to go way down, or they're violating the agreement. They're purchasing our farm products, or they're not. If they're not, they're violating the agreement. Their currency, which went up over 10% when we first started the trade agreement, that's got to come down. So it's very easy to measure some of these things, and if they violate the agreement, we have a fully enforceable mechanism to make sure that the Americans are protected.
Do you think they'll abide by this agreement, or do you fully expect that they will try to get around it?
I like what Ambassador Lighthizer has had to say, and I think this is exactly right. You have the reformers with Liu He in China. They desperately want to abide by this agreement because they know that their economy cannot survive unless they reform. But you have the mercantilist, protectionist hawks in China that think they can only grow China on the backs of everybody else. So they're going to fight that out, but either way, we are protected here in America because we'll either get a good implemented deal or we'll get proportionate response measures with a fully enforceable deal. Can't lose.
One other thing I want to ask you, Peter Navarro. President Trump frequently argues the American people, and you said this a moment ago, that tariffs aren't bad for the American people.
Are great. They're good. We've proven that.
Economists at the Federal Reserve Bank, respected institution, have done a lot of research. They've come back, and we see it again today. They are saying the reality is, and I'm quoting from just the latest one analysis, U.S. tariffs continue to be almost entirely borne by U.S. firms and U.S. consumers.
So the long answer to that was published yesterday in an op-ed I did in the Wall Street Journal. Your learned audience can go to that. The short answer is the economics profession is bankrupt in terms of analyzing tariffs. They look at it a very narrow framework. Tariffs for the Trump administration have saved our steel and aluminum industry and brought billions of dollars of new investment into that industry. The threat of tariffs have brought billions more investment in from our auto industry, from both domestic companies like GM, but also BMW and others. So they're working there. With Mexico, when we threatened tariffs, we got more out of Mexico in terms of helping border security there. The tariffs have been the only thing that have gotten China to the bargaining table. So you have to think about tariffs strategically like this president does. They're working beautifully for America.
Peter Navarro, Senior Advisor to the President on Trade. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you tonight.